All right, so we've seen the triangle setup position. We've seen triangle stage 1.5 and how it allows us to move the triangle setup position and then ultimately the finish. And sometimes we may get to the triangle setup position, right, however we get there. And however we get there means from stage 1.5 for where we are now, from stage 1.5, we pull the foot through and go under the peak of the mountain. We go around the world, or we do a stage 1.5 creation, right? Either way, any of those three options, we end up here in the triangle setup position. And the person's just so strong that even if we have the arm across or whatever it is we're trying to do, they're able to just blast free of the triangle every time. Go ahead and just sit up and sit out, right? And if this is dangerous, because look what can happen. They can take the leg and put my knees together, and they can put pressure on my hips, and now I have a very difficult time doing anything. I have to really scramble for my recovery here, right? So against a person who is this strong and this big, I would suggest that you don't even bother getting into the triangle setup to begin with, because you know that your triangle is going to be compromised. Best that you try and keep a very heavy, very strong, very aggressive, forward-moving opponent in your guard by just sticking to the punch block series. So I'm holding the head down and I have the arm covered and I'm working through whatever I'm working through. Maybe they're not even punching. Maybe they're just constantly rushing at me and bulldozing and jumping to their feet and all this kind of stuff, right? So I just want to keep their head down as much as possible. For this scenario, they're on their knees. It's going to make it easier for us to practice. Let's spin a little bit here so we're facing the camera. And what I want is if I see them up and over me like this, right? I'm going to use my guard mechanics. Remember, we talked about how the guard can push people away or it can draw them in. So from this position, I'm going to use my guard, my feet here over the back, crossed, to control their hips and push them away. And once I push them away, both hands are going to go to the head, and I'm going to push the head to one side. And the reason I push the head to one side is so that I can open my feet and put my foot on the ground and scoot away a little bit and allow me to get my foot in the hip. And because this foot can go in the hip, it's easy for me to put that foot in the hip. And from here, I can hold the arm. And now look, if they continue to try and rush at me, I can just hold them away with my feet, right? And the farther away they get, because I stretch them, the easier it is to open one side. And as they run towards me, I pull them in to the triangle setup. And now I hold the arm. And I put the foot in the hip and hold the head and walk back. Right? The reason this works is because from the initial triangle setup position, right? From the initial triangle setup position, they are already trying to move over me constantly. So they're able to regain their hips underneath me. See, when they walk their knees close, it allows them to sit up. It allows them to sit up. I need to create a situation where they're so far away from me, that the time it takes them to walk their knees and hips back under my body is the time that I have the triangle already almost completed. Does that make sense? I'm just creating a time differential here. And the way I do that is to take them to the length of my legs. Now, if you look at the distance between his knee and my hip, and remember that he needs to get both knees close to my hip so that he can be underneath me to use the pressure of his hands to push up and free himself from the triangle. I keep him at length, and I hold the arm and pull him so that the upper half of his body is coming towards me, and the bottom half of his body is going away. And the idea here is that when I open my guard like this, and I give him this chance to rush, I bait him, but look still how far away he is. Right? Look how far away he is. Of course, I don't need to do the first step in the triangle setup position, because when I pull him, the arm already naturally comes across. And I have the time. Look at the time it takes him to walk in. That's already the time that I'm keeping him away again. And I walk back, and now I turn, grab, and finish. Right? I'm buying myself the extra second or two that it takes for him to close the distance between his hips, his knees right here and my hips. Right, again, look what happens. If we're in the triangle setup position from a standard variation of stage 1.5, See how close his knees already are. And he just takes 1-2 steps, and he puts his hands down, and he pushes, and he's out. Right? I need to, let's turn this way, thanks. I need to buy myself some extra time. Bigger usually means a little bit slower. He may be stronger, and he may hit harder, but I'm going to take advantage of the lack of speed that a smaller, more nimble person might have to close the distance, right? He's got a lot more baggage to move because the body's bigger. So what do? I create that distance, which buys me those 1 or 2 extra seconds of time. Obviously, 10 yards away to the 0 point is longer and takes longer to accomplish than 2 yards away to the 0 point. Right? So I'm just making that extra distance. Maybe I increase it by X number of feet or inches, and that's what buys me the time. So I'm in this situation here, and he's always bulldozing against me. First thing is I want to get him off me, so I can even hold the shoulders here, and then I use the guard to push him down south. And once I do, I can find an angle for the head, right? I like to push this way. So both hands go to the head, and I just push. And I straighten him. Look, I lock my arms, and I don't let him come back. Now that he's locked open, right? First he's locked down, boom. Then he's locked open. Now that he's locked open, it's safe for me to put my foot on the ground and move just enough to get my foot in the hip. And now I can put my other foot in the hip. And look what's happening. Every time I move, he's getting farther and farther away from me. And of course, anyone who's going to be rushing at me is certainly not going to do that with their arms back. So he leaves me one arm free. And the arm he leaves me free happens to be very nice for me to grab because the angle I made with my hips put one arm low and one arm high. So I just take the high arm and I move myself away. And I hold him in place here. It's hard for him to rush at me, right? But even if he is able to because he's strong enough and big enough and he overpowers me, look at all the distance there is between his knees and my hips. And it's in the time that it takes for him to cover that I open the guard back up and pull him in to a more solid position. And now look, he's still quite a distance away. He's not as close as he was before. He's not only 2 steps away. And even if he was only 2 steps away because I pulled him already across, by this time I'm holding the head and putting the foot in the hip and keeping him away. And that extra time that I get from the extra distance I create allows me enough time to turn the leg, hold the shin, figure 4, knees together, pull the head and lift the hips. Right? That's why this works. Okay, so one time with a silent demonstration. Okay, does that make sense? All right, guys, let's give that a try.